This is an oral history interview in connection with the Adelante Tigres event. Richard Ober, of class of 1965, is the interviewer, and Aida Pacheco of the class of 1977 is the interviewee. This is taking place on March 30th, 2017 at McLean House in Princeton. So tell me a little bit about what happened in your life. You were born and...
Okay, I was born in New York, 1955, and I lived in Puerto Rico for about a year. Maybe I was about three and a half or so, and grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, which is 15, 20 minutes from here.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in an extended family, very close. My mother was the first Latina to be a foster parent in the area in Mercer County. And so I grew up with a lot of foster sisters and brothers. So never really had my own room, but that was okay. We had a lot of fun. We didn't have a lot of money, but I do remember trips with my uncle and the family to New York, and we would all kind of like pack the kids in the car. I don't remember seatbelts at that time. And we had some fun time there, and the dinners were huge, and when we danced, it was the kids with the adults. It was a lot of fun. We did picnics, we did family games, television. So it was it wasn't rich as far as monetary, but it was very rich as far as the family being close, and just the cousins were more like brothers and sisters than they were, and I appreciate that extended family. I think that it helped me when I came here to have that.
Did you go to public or private schools?
I actually went to a public school. It was the only public high school in the city of Trenton. We had about over 3,000 students, a little over 3,000, because it had the career technical education as well, and it was from 9th to 12th grade. So by the time, it was probably like about 1,000 each class. By the time I graduated in 1973, it was a class of about 800. When I came to Princeton, I found out that was early admissions, December. It was me, and I was the first Latino from Trenton, New Jersey, ever to be accepted to Trenton at that time. To Princeton at that time. And I was the first Latina female in New Jersey to be accepted to Princeton. And I found out that year was the first year that Princeton accepted more students from public school than private school. It was a period. My first year there was we were experiencing the residual effect of the civil rights movement and the assassination of Martin Luther King. We were experiencing a lot of racial disturbances at the school, so my education was kind of disrupted. When the warm weather would come around, you would expect some kind of tension and racial disturbance. So the students were kept home. My mother would make us go to school. And learning was sort of just, like I said, disrupted during that period. So when I was my senior year applying to school, a lot of my friends were being told at that time to apply, not to apply to four-year school, but maybe career technical or community college. I was fortunate that I was participating in an Upward Bound program. And there was a gentleman heading that program that had connections to Princeton, and he was the one that must have seen some ability in me and encouraged me to apply to Princeton. I really didn't understand Princeton, although I was 20 minutes away. I've never stepped foot on campus until it was early decision that time, and I think it was December or something that had a reception for us, so I would say that was in 1976, early admissions, I would think. So that was kind of my first experience. And the reason that I applied to 5 schools, and I was accepted to all 5. One of them was Rutgers, because my brother was there, and they had a lot of Latinos there. I remember at Rutgers, and It was a lot of fun. They had a lot of social events and parties, and the guys were really cute. Just and so I kind of wanted to go to Rutgers, and but believe it or not, Princeton was the one that gave me initially a really good financial package, basically a full scholarship. Whereas Rutgers was not as, that they gave me some money, and when I was making the decision, there were two things. One, my brother was very protective of me, and I was 17. And so I just knew that, I wasn't going to get away with anything. Because my mom was also very protective. And so I thought, I better go to Princeton, and because of the financial situation. And although they offered a full scholarship after the fact, I had already made up my mind. But I really, Princeton, as far as the prestige and all of that, really was because, I don't know, I just didn't think really about that part of it. But it was a different world, although 20 minutes away. I remember my best friend was from Chambersburg. It was one of the most ethnically preserved communities in the country by Time magazine at the time. And we were the first Puerto Ricans to move there. And my best friend was Italian, of course, and she came to visit me my first year here. And I expressed to her how different this is. And sometimes it even made me feel physically, not a lot, but I remember one time walking to the cafeteria just feeling sick to my stomach. It was just so different. And she was telling me that she went to Montclair, felt a difference too in adjusting at first. So it was a very different world. I don't believe it was. I think folks were very nice. It was just an adjustment. I'll be honest with you.
So the next question was, how did that prepare or fail to prepare you for Princeton, both socially, which I think you've addressed, and intellectually?
Intellectually, like I said, with the racial disturbances that I told you about, that in the disruption, I felt that there were teachers there that somehow didn't have a lot of expectations of us. And so they weren't teaching the way they should be teaching. The Upward Bound program, again, gave me a lot of assistance. I also took some community college courses in biology because that's what my intended major was. I had an interest in that, and I took a writing course before I came here. And so the preparation, I did have good preparation, I thought, with the sciences and the math and language. I was born and raised here, so I was more proficient in English, spoke Spanish. I could understand and read and write it, but I learned to do that in high school. So I think that was good. I think the discipline in academics, I had to learn to really, in writing a paper, this is what I learned here. And I remember when I switched my major and I decided in sociology, I went to the head of the sociology department at the time, and we had 3 papers to do, and midterm and final. And I remember when he spoke to the entire class, and that's when he mentioned about us, that most of the students were from public schools, as if that was a negative thing. And I inferred that because he would say that our papers were horrible. The first papers we submitted were just terrible. And we were expected to write the next 2 papers, and he was not going to grade them. So coming from where I came from, my background, and having met folks that came from private schools and had the best preparation, so I didn't come with a lot of confidence to begin with. And so I internalized that, like, oh, place is not, for me. So I agonized over that second paper, and I thought, let me go to him and, maybe get some advice. And the advice that he gave me basically was no advice, and just say, well, why did you apply to Princeton? Why didn't you go to Mercer County? So that's when I called my mom, and I said, Mommy, this is not for me. And I was only 20 minutes away. So I had packed my bags, because it was really hard. And so
very common, there's a name for it, imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So so I packed my bags, and she was on her way. By some miracle, my best friend Daphne, she grew up in Newark, And we became very close during the summer orientation program, which was fantastic. I think the bond that we created in that group was amazing. And she knocked on the door just to make sure, I don't know, she just knocked on the door, and I remember opening, and she showed my suitcase, and she says, "Where are you going?" I says, "Daphne, I'm sorry, but this is just not for me." And so she said, "Hell no. You and we're going to get through this together." Mommy had already arrived, and so, my mom was a GED. When I was in junior high school, I attained her GED. And so Mama was like, "Okay, want to come?" It wasn't like, "No, you got to stay," that kind of thing. So she was fine. But I'll never forget that. I think, when you go into a class, like I said, my intended major was biology. I walk into this first semester was great. The second semester, the professor stands there and said, "Look to your right, look to your left. 2 out of 3, 2 out of the 3 of you would be gone." So that was really intimidating. I passed the course, I remember, but I decided I wanted to do research, and I thought, I don't know, that's something that I would really like to do. I'm very much of an extrovert, if you didn't realize. And so I decided I'd go to my career advisor, and I asked her, I says, "I don't know if biology is what I want to do." I had a very narrow focus about careers and options. So she asked me, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I remember thinking, well, that's why I'm here. And so I just said, well, I like people, and I just decided to pick sociology. It was just out of the blue. I think I'm kind of answered too much of the other.
No, that's
sorry.
great. By the way, they just tore down your high school.
I know. My brother showed. It was last year that he took me by. I was so upset.
I'm not going to ask why did you go to Princeton, because we got that answer.
Sorry.
Where did you live when you were here?
I lived in Trenton. I mean,
on campus.
Oh, on campus. Oh, I lived at the zoo. Do you remember what the zoo was? Boulder Hall was known as the zoo at the time. And so
I lived there 4 years.
At Boulder Hall, yeah. Well, when I was there, that's what they called it, the zoo at the time. And ate the Commons. I guess is appropriate name, because Commons were the place. It was the most affordable meal plan, and women weren't allowed. At the social clubs, and I never really got invited until after I graduated, years after. But so Commons, and I remember when we had the room, it was a quad, so it was a 2. We had 3 other roommates, and they were wonderful. And there was a fireplace. Never had a fireplace. Bay window. Always loved bay windows. And I just thought, wow, this is really, really neat. And because I never had a fireplace, but I was so determined to light up the fireplace, didn't know anything about a flute, and I kind of, you can imagine what happened, it was smoke all over the place. That was one experience. And then I remember I was told about streaking. I said, oh, wow. And like I said, we were very naive, all 4 of us actually, and like I said, my other roommate was from Puerto Rico, and very, very, I said, but for us, that was going to be a big thing. And I remember all of us just waiting for the guys to go through. That was another thing. But anyway, it was all new. It was exciting. It was challenging. But that's, so I lived at Holder Hall. And then from there, I think was it Wilcox, because we had, and from there I had my own room actually. And that was exciting because, like I said, I think all the years living at home, I think I had my room maybe for a little bit, and then, every time someone in the family had a problem, or I had to share it, so give it up. So that was exciting to have my own room for 3 years, and I really decorated it to make it look homey and everything, and so it was kind of exciting to have your own room. That was a big deal for me.
Were there many other Latino students in the sociology department?
No. Gosh, to be honest with you, there were only about maybe less than 23 Latinos in my class. Class 77, and I don't remember that. To be honest with you, I don't remember any other but one else. A lot of my friends went either into politics or Woo, like pre-med, economics. I think I may have been the only one, but I don't want to say that for certain. I can't, but I don't remember the group that of those 23. We kind of all almost knew I knew almost every one of them, maybe except one that I don't remember.
You take any courses that related to Latino issues?
Yes, I think that was really important for a lot of us as Latinos because we had to. It was real important for us to make that connection. And so we had the Latin American Studies certificate, and I bet you the majority of us probably took on either some courses or got the certificate. And I also had the certificate in Spanish and did the teacher's preparation program. But definitely did some of the literature courses and got the certificate. And it was a really neat, we had Paul Sigmund, and some of us even thought that he was involved with the CIA. Yeah, and he was great. His wife Barbara I knew, who was very involved in politics, and I'm trying to think of the other professor that were there, but I do remember Sigmund was the man, and it was a very great. And I think a lot of us took it too because we were all, a lot of us were mainly Latinos, and it was just nice to have that, bond, and so it was. We became very, very close.
Did your professors have any reaction to having a Latino or other, quote, minority students in the class?
I never personally, except for that one incident that I told you about that I almost left, I don't remember anyone, no.
How about because you're a woman? Nobody asked you for the women's point of view?
No, that's interesting. Not that it's been over 43 years, so I don't remember. I do, but I don't think that was because I was a woman. I think that, honestly, no. I can't remember that. I think that for us it was more, as women, navigate, and then being Latina, with that the double standard, I think it was more dealing with the guys, accepting us as women and strong women, and we came through a period where the growth of women's rights and our role was significant with the abortion. And so I think that empowered a lot of us at the time. I don't think the guys were ready for that per se, but
I just bought Nancy Malkiel's book.
Oh, sure.
I've heard her twice. The one, "Don't Let the Damn Women In."
Oh, I need to read that one. Yeah. So that to me was more of a.
It's a history of that era of going into coeducation.
Wow, I'd like to read that.
After sometime maybe not in our hour. We can get together and I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that
because
would
I was
be really
there
great.
for it.
Wow, you were there. Oh, wow.
Because I was at Yale when it happened at Princeton and at Yale.
Right.
Here's a tough one.
Uh-oh.
I couldn't answer. How would you characterize the intellectual atmosphere
Here?
at Princeton?
I feel that for most of it, a lot of it was very theoretical. I found, except for maybe the Latin American studies, where I felt we had two conversations. I mean, there's a lot of change happening in Latin America, and so and maybe because it was more my comfort level, that I felt there was more of interchange in conversations. It seemed more realistic to me. With the teacher preparation program, for example, we needed to have more hands-on relative to managing the classroom and disciplinary. It was more of a very theoretical approach to learning. So maybe it was just like with me, I don't know. I think that part of it was me because I didn't challenge. I think I didn't embrace the challenge. I think that level, that lack of confidence, whatever, just kind of lingered, I love my literature. We had a great professor with Don Quixote because he was so passionate. And I'm trying to think of his name. He's no longer with us. But he was so inspiring, and he provoked a lot of thinking. But there were certain classes that I just felt it was just, teaching the facts, you read your book, and I didn't, unless the precepts, what I didn't enjoy were the precepts. I thought that was a great, because at first I remember my freshman year being very intimidated and didn't want to say anything. And then I said, okay, I can sit here through the whole semester and not understand a thing. Or I can speak up. And I don't know what one of the students was talking. I didn't understand anything he said. Partially. And I said, can you please explain to me? I'm having, and all of a sudden it was like two other students. Yeah, we didn't understand either. And the preceptor was, so I realized that I think a lot of us were feeling the same way, but too intimidated to say anything, because you have this thing when you go to Princeton, you're this extremely bright person. And even when I graduated, I remember being very hesitant to tell people I went to Princeton, only because they place you in this box and they have all these expectations, and I felt that I would fall short of that, I guess. And it was a little bit intimidating. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No. Yes.
Okay.
Certainly did. Do you remember anything distinctive about how Latinos or women or folks in general participated in lectures and precepts? Did they sit together? Were they very vocal, or were they all shy, or was it?
Yeah. Well, because other than the Latino Studies program, because there were more of us, the other class we were so few, so it was probably very rare. I mean, like in my Spanish literature class, I remember Charlie Hay in my class. So we were there together, and we would sit together. But in other classes, it was pretty much like maybe just one Latina or Latino. But what we did though, our safe place, our comfort place, and our social network was with Third World Center. And so when they had special discussions, sometimes lectures, then you would see a lot of the minorities that were there. And so, but yeah, it was really like when I think about my sociology classes, when I think about anthropology classes that I took there weren't Latinos to sit next to, or any.
I'm going to throw one question of my own in there. Mm-hmm. Do you regard minorities as a appropriate label, or are there others which are preferable?
I don't know, because I think the term that's coming out a lot is people of color.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that better. But even with because we're minorities then, I mean, even within our own subgroups, within our own, I guess, what I want to say, circles, we didn't embrace that diversity even within ourselves. It's interesting. I was thinking about that. When we think about diversity and inclusiveness, it's sort of like, because I guess we felt we had to be a certain way or hang so tight to where we came from, there were certain blacks or even Puerto Ricans who maybe didn't want to join the club, the Puerto Rican, Acción Puertorriqueña at the time, or didn't want to be go to the Third World Center, or so I remember some blacks were saying they're not black enough, they're like an Oreo or something, or weren't Puerto Rican or Latino enough. And I felt that was very unfair. I remember a woman who was a freshman, I believe, and I was maybe a junior, I can't remember. And she came to me and she says, I feel very Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. And just because, I said, you know what? Switch it in your heart. I says, if you're not, it's don't worry. I says, I know you're Puerto Rican. I don't have to prove, you know that I'm Puerto Rican. And so, but yeah, there was a lot of, within our own circles, some somewhat pressure to be a certain way and to act a certain way. And if you didn't, then you weren't Latino enough, I guess. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. But people of color, I think, is a new term that I think it's more, people feel more comfortable with. But I always had an issue with, when people ask me, where you're from, I would just, I say I'm Puerto Rican. I never, I would never say I'm white or that I'm like, it was always identified by my ethnicity.
Was there any differentiation among the different ethnic origins within the Latino community?
Yeah, when we had, I think in my class, the 23 in my class, we were pretty diverse. And said, well, we had a lot of Puerto Ricans, particularly from New York, and we had about 3 from Puerto Rico. But we had the Chicanos. So you either, and you had folks from Uruguay and Ecuador. So it was pretty diverse within that. And then I think as the following year that you had more Chicanos. And so we had a very active Acción Puertorriqueña that was at one point co-chaired by Charlie Hay and Sonia Sotomayor. And but then I think that I remember at a point when we wanted to invite other Latinos. And I think later the Chicanos wanted to have their own thing because there are differences. And whereas...
Now, is Chicano defined as Mexican origin?
Mm-hmm. Particularly from California, a lot from California and Texas. And so for Puerto Ricans, a lot of us, we were near here. But, for them, they were far away. It's a kind of, especially if they came from a different, not Texas, but maybe from Mexico or something like that. But there were some differences, and I'm glad to see that the past couple of years, they changed it to Princeton Latinos and Amigos. I think that there's a lot more that unite. We need to find what unites us, and maintain and respect the differences, and see if you can find avenues to be able to seek that. But I know there was a lot of controversy over bringing it together as opposed to keeping it separate. Chicano organization and the Puerto Rican organization, and I don't remember if there was any other one. But for us at the time, I just remember Acción Puertorriqueña for us at that time. So
what did your social life revolve around?
Well, when we had the summer orientation program, there's a group of us that really bonded. As a matter of fact, we had 2 Indians in that class, and there were 3 Indians. Or was it? There were 5 in the entire university enrolled, 5 Native Americans. And
Native Americans.
Native Americans. I'm sorry, I meant to. And
okay, I was
2 or 3.
About to ask which kind of Indian.
2, and I think our class had the largest, which is 3. And we were all very close. We were part of that orientation program. We kind of stuck together. And the Third World Center would be the place where we have the dances. As a matter of fact, when I came here, I brought the idea, the cultural festival here at Princeton for the first time, and then we expanded the scope to have a policy forum on Latin America. And so I handled more of the cultural aspect the first year. And I remember approaching, because Sonia and Charlie were the co-chairs, and I remember approaching them and saying, I want to do this. I think we could do this. Rucker has it. Says, well, I don't think Princeton's going to be open to that. I says, oh, come on. I says, what could they say? No. So I convinced Sonia and Charlie. Now, mind you, there's the next one's a justice. Charlie was a big, big lawyer heading the largest legal service organization in the country in Puerto Rico. So they, of course, went to Francois Hoffman, who was the head of the Romance languages, and they convinced him. I remember being there, and we got like 5,000, which was a lot of money then, and we did a great cultural festival with dancing. We had salsa music, and then I remember having to cater. And I thought, I could find a Latino restaurant. We had restaurants, but no one they catered at the time. I had to bring my extended family. I brought my mom, my aunts, and we had like 7 women and made these big calderos, those big pots of rice. We had everybody. It was so nice because the crowd was so diverse. And it was, we had it every year since I was there. So socially, we brought in one of my friends, Jose Colon, brought the Latino band, Willie Colon, the professional band. It was really great. He established the first radio station that brought salsa music that was heard from outside of the university. It was very, very popular. So we had our dances. I loved to dance. I found dancing here at the university when I took the class to be too stiff for me. So I joined the only ethnic dance group here. It was called a Gile. And the Gile was primarily black. It was all black. And so I learned to do, I was the only Puerto Rican and or Latina or non-black. And it was fun because I learned how to do African dance. We did modern dance, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So socially, we pretty much hung together. I regret that I didn't feel so comfortable in the social clubs here. We weren't invited one, and very few of us, I guess. But it took me a while to even come back to the university. And when I did, it was to my 10th year reunion. And the bond, though, that you formed here was just tremendous. And then I realized, Aida, it says, you're here, you were given this privilege and this opportunity because there was an alumni, a white alumni, who provided you a scholarship. I wouldn't be here. And so I'm so thoroughly grateful. And I come back because one of the things I think that Princeton was, a lot of the minorities are very strong in community service. So with Princeton's motto, I think a lot of it had already been, that was deep rooted in us. I think we felt like this extra thing to go back to our communities. We did a lot of volunteer work. Like Sonia started the volunteers in the psychiatric hospital. I did that a couple times, but then I wanted to go to the migrant farm workers. I would go home and help with voter registration, things like that. So I come back because I'm so grateful, and I realize there's a lot of first generation folks that are going through some of the things that we went through. And I've met some wonderful people. Like I met you now, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's been so socially we had our parties, our rooms, our dorms. As I said, we made them. Most of our dorms were really, really decorated and with things that remind us of home, and so we had a lot of social, events in people's rooms. One of the places that was known as Blair Hall, and we had that's where I got my exposure to jazz. There was a group of guys who formed the first ethnic band. It was called Anubis. They were amazing, and so we kind of hung out like that pretty tightly.
Did you do any of the sort of traditional things like house parties or junior prom or things like that, or?
I didn't. I did go to, one of my friends invited me to be his prom date, and I did do that. You know what? I don't even think I went to my prom. I went to two proms, but I was a date for someone else, and I don't know why I didn't. I don't need. For some reason, I remember that, but I don't remember going to my prom. I was pretty sheltered, I guess. Boring.
For the record, the names of the various Latino groups and so forth that you were involved with at that time, I mean, you've sort of referred to them. Could you just sort of just briefly describe what the names of the groups were at that time?
The main one was Acción Puertorriqueña, was the main one, and the other ones were pretty known, but it was Agile, is the dance group, and Anubis was the band that we would just follow wherever they would go. I really didn't participate in any. There was no push or anything to adventure and travel abroad, or I just, a lot of us in that group. You have to think about it this way, that I never traveled outside like New Jersey, New York. I did go to Puerto Rico, as I told, but that was, if I could do it again, I would have taken advantage of a lot of the opportunities that are here, and I didn't really. There was no one to kind of push us to say, hey, you should do this and you should do that kind of thing.
Any sporting activities?
Actually, I did tennis, but I had done tennis in high school and would just play outside. I did try out for cheerleading. I used to do Russian jumps and land on a straddle, splits, walkovers, back bends, flips. Did not make the cheering squad. And I'll never forget that my friend Yana and I both tried out, and we were talking about how we were going to modernize the routines. I used to cheer in Trenton High, which was dominantly black. So, but I mean, not go overboard. But I remember, and the captain, the cheerleader, heard us and approached us and said that we were here to please the alumni, and they're very, very conservative. But I said, okay. But I was looking. I was, at the tryouts. No one. I mean, I can't remember anyone that did the kind of stuff that I was able to do, and I did not make it. So for a lot of us, there was a lot of firsts. But there were a lot of disappointments in the sense that we were not used to that. I mean, like my friend was a classic violinist, didn't make the orchestra, and she's amazing. She's playing the symphony where she lives now, and she was heartbroken. And then there were a few disappointments, and I say that I don't know whether that was the reason I didn't make it, but that was to answer your question. No, the cheerleading was the main thing I wanted.
So you're not really sure whether it was for that and for the violinists and things like that, whether it was just discrimination because you were from a different ethnic background, or a perception that whatever you were going to produce would be different than what the expectations were, and therefore would be out of the mainstream.
In all honesty, I think it was a combination of both. For my friend, I really feel it was definitely discrimination. And with the cheerleading, I think it's a combination of both because...
Now, who decided what violinists got to be in the orchestra?
I guess it was the head of the music department, whoever did the auditions. I can't remember. I just know that she was
So it was faculty, it wasn't other students.
Yeah, it was faculty.
Whereas with the cheerleading squad,
I think it may
students.
have been. Yeah, I think it was. It was so long ago, but I just was so disappointed because I really wanted to do that, and it was just. But you know, it is what it is.
We move on.
We move on. Yeah.
Were there any big events on campus? Really controversial speakers or riots or sit-ins or things?
We did have a sit-in. I didn't actually go to that rally, and I don't remember why, but we did have. I'm trying to think what year it was. Was it 70?
And what was the reason?
70. It was apartheid. I remember that there was a sit-in at Nassau and everything, and then there was the protests outside. There were a lot of people that were involved in that, and so
this was about the university's investments in South Africa.
Yes, yeah, but I do remember that, and I don't remember. I'm trying to think of but I just remember like I said with the Culture Fest and the political forums, we had really some good discussion about Latin America, and I remember we brought Rita Moreno. Sonia and Margarita Rosa helped bring that. And we brought the Puerto Rican traveling company at that time, and as a matter of fact, Miriam Colon was the one who founded that, and she died a couple of months ago. So, but I don't remember. I remember that when we did the political forum policy discussion, we tried to make sure that it was neutral, so that we never really had we never had any kind of protests or anything like that with the kind of speakers that we brought in at that time. But I do remember the apartheid issue.
So how did Princeton affect you once you came out of Princeton? Being a Princeton, you said sometimes you didn't want to tell people.
Well, I will tell you that one of the things, I didn't go to graduate school like a lot of my friends did because I felt compelled to go back to teach at the high school that I graduated from, because my mom at the time had a little part-time job as a truant officer there, but she also helped our only bilingual counselor. Bilingual education was important to me at the time, and I did my thesis as a matter of bilingual education. And so a lot of us were being told not to apply to Princeton. I found out that they were still continuing to do that. And so I was ready to say that the counselors and teachers who taught me approached my mother, and I'll never forget this, and told her that Aida would give her less than a year. She's not going to make it. There were some white students that had applied and did not get in. I got in along with a black friend of mine who chose to go to Rutgers. Her sister actually attended here. And I just felt, you can say to me, but not my mother. And I took it. And my mom was so happy. She didn't say anything back to them or anything. And I just felt like I had to, one, be a mentor, because there were very few. And I just wanted to go off with the host. You're the teacher. You're supposed to inspire. You're supposed to believe in your students. And if you feel there's a potential, then you're supposed to build that potential. And so a lot of the teachers were still there. And I had to go back there. So I taught for about 7 years there, and I was sponsoring the club. We did scholarship fundraising. I had a dance group called Latin Expressions. We were even on television, a Puerto Rican Panorama, which is like the longest running, I think talk show in the area. And all these girls graduated. No one got pregnant. At the time, the pregnancy rate was kind of teen pregnancy, and they still contact me today. So Princeton Impact.
Did any of them go to Princeton?
Hmm?
Any of them go to Princeton?
The young lady that helped me with the piano is a doctor, went to Princeton, and she's a doctor. And my foster care sister, her daughter, went to Princeton and became a doctor, Marta Santos. Yeah, so that was very inspiring. And many of them went to, to college. I said I'm very, very happy about that. But Princeton's impact, it took me some time to come back and to reconcile and put things in perspective. Like you said, but that was more an internal thing with me as far as my confidence. And but I do remember people asking me, "How did you get to Princeton?" That I was just a token, affirmative action, and that was kind of hurtful. And I remember saying one time with someone, I just got so tired of that question that I said, "Well, I did a striptease in front of the trustees." I mean, I just get so. But I said, "Look, I'm there." I remember this young woman who was a straight A who agonized over her grades, didn't graduate because she didn't get to do her thesis. I graduated. So to me, it takes perseverance, and I feel better about it right now. But I did get after Princeton, there was a lot of that, question, doubtfulness that people felt that I just got in there, not because someone felt that I was qualified. And then I find out through the admissions process that first of all, fifth class of women were sort of, you look through their application, you compete with the other women applicants, you're competing with the other, males. And then if you're a minority, you're also competing with minorities. So it's even tougher, sometimes. And that was, but I do have to say that Princeton has really helped me career-wise. All the jobs that I wanted, I was able to work in the mayor's office. I'm pretty sure having that Princeton name in there helped me. I had the honor of working for Mayor Holland, who was one of the longest-term mayors in the country, and he was the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I was able to build Mercer MedChat. It's called the Mercer Hispanic Association, which is still in existence today. And I remember when I moved to Virginia, out of the blue, I said, let me write the alumni that live in Virginia. Amazing. They wrote back. I was offered a job. It wasn't the job that I wanted, but they connected me to other people. I wanted to work in government. I'm a true heart public servant. And I have to say that networking was amazing. And so I'm very grateful. And I would just recently, I had a meeting. I chair the governor's Latino Advisory Board in Virginia. I had a meeting with the governor. And I said, "So, Governor, if you remember me," of course I remember you, Princeton. So they, remember that. And I'm very honored and very privileged that I did have this opportunity. And that's the one. And I've met some great people. So
we're a tribe.
We're a tribe, yes. I think no one else, unless you're a Princetonian, understands that feeling, that bond. It's amazing. So
what was your thesis on?
My thesis was on bilingual education in New Jersey, and that was the first time anyone did anything like that. So I studied the what bilingual education is it working, how it really should be implemented. And I remember Manuel del Valle, who was class of 71. I was so honored because he's amazing too. And he had read it. And it says, I don't know if he emailed me, I can't remember, but he mentioned, Aida, that was good. So I was kind of proud about that. Again, the reason I picked bilingual education was because bilingual education started at Trenton High because I was about, I think, a sophomore. My brother was a junior, and we had a couple of seniors, protested almost every day. We would go to the board meetings, bring some of our parents, even if they didn't speak English, and we fought for bilingual education. It really started with fighting for our first bilingual counselor. She was working on a volunteer basis. She was the one who brought us to camp. None of us went to camp. I'll never forget it. So I think I picked that because it was personal for me. having brought in, it started with that bilingual counselor, and then it got bigger until we had our bilingual department, bilingual education department. So.
Anything else you'd like to add about Princeton?
I'm excited. I'm excited that Princeton's doing this. I'm excited that I think we have a great president. I think that he's very open. The past few years, even before this president, they would begin to embrace the differences, and I think that's wonderful. Giving voices to yes, I went to the LGBT conference. I went to the African Black conference. I went to the women's conference and the Asian American conference. I missed the Jewish conference, and I think that's just wonderful. And so Princeton has given me a lot, and so I feel I just enjoy coming back now. I didn't feel that way before, and like I said, it took me a while. But like you said, we're a tribe. Love the rituals.